Good day, everyone. Chef P here. We're talking about sourdough. So if you've watched the video on how to create your own sourdough starter, okay, so that would have been a 7-day process, or maybe someone has been kind enough to give you some starter. So if you have some starter, that's great. Um, putting sort of the beginning to the end of everything for sourdough would make a pretty long video, and my editing skills are horrible, so I haven't been able to master the patchwork and being able to put them together. Hopefully in time I'll be able to do that. But so meanwhile, we're just going to have these little pieces. So this piece here is actually the creation of the dough, working our way to the bread. And you may have seen that I gave you one on shaping and making baguettes from sourdough. I also want to do another one where I'll show you how to bake one in a Dutch oven in the oven as well. So do a proper sourdough loaf that you've seen most likely in farmers markets and that sort of thing. So what I did today was I took my original starter and I fed it. So again, in that other video about creation and feeding your starter, you would have seen this already. This was here this morning, so I've actually doubled in size, and this is really good. So when I fed it, I started off with 200 grams of starter, so my previous starter. I discarded the rest. Then I added dechlorinated water, 75 grams of that. We're going by weight, and 75 grams of flour. And then I left it in a nice warm environment, and obviously we've got some expansion here. So this is a healthy starter, and we want that. What I've also done that I didn't put on the video for you is I created something, it's the base for my bread. And we call this autolyse. And autolyse is very important because what you're basically doing is you're putting the flour and the water that you're going to use in the bread recipe without the starter, okay, and without the salt, and we're letting that sort of absorb, and it helps to change the texture, helps to really hydrate that flour so that when we add the starter, it's got something to work with. So that's really important to do. So let's talk about the actual sourdough recipe, and it's all based on baker's percentages, we call them. And I've done just a single loaf, but if one of the easy ways to do it is with a double loaf recipe, and it's only easy because of the way the measurements work. So you'll start off with 1,000 grams of flour. Okay, so that flour can be mixed as well. So it can be, here I've actually got white, and I've got about 20% of it is whole wheat. But you could throw in some rye in there, you could throw in some multigrain, all kinds of different flours together. But you're trying to reach that 1,000 grams. Once you get that, then you're going to put 80% water. Okay, so for that 1,000 grams of flour, we're going to add 800 grams of water. Okay, and then to that, we're going to put 15% of starter, and we're going to mix that in there. And then we're going to put 2% salt. So your recipe for 2 loaves basically works out to be this: 1,000 grams of flour, 800 grams by weight, of course, of water, okay, 15% or 150 grams of starter, and 2% or 20 grams of salt. I'm only doing a single one today, so I've cut everything in half. So my flour is coming up to 500 grams, my water is 400 grams, my starter will be 75 grams, and my salt will be 10 grams. So why don't we get that going. Now this autolyse, so this part that I've done here, I've let that sit with the water and the flour for 45 minutes. I figured you didn't need to see that, but all you really do is mix your water and your flour, mix it up, leave it covered either with light plastic or a towel on top. And I chose the towel and I put it on top. So what it is now is this little bit of a sticky mess right now. So we're going to take our scale, and I'll just assume you know, here's the scale. You won't be able to read the numbers, but that's okay. So I'm going to put that on there, and then I'm going to zero that out. Okay, so that once I've zeroed that out, then I'm going to add my, okay, so if you're following the double loaf recipe, you'd put 150 grams. I'm only going to put 75 grams of my starter. And that starter is nice and bubbled up all the way to the top like that. I'm going to give it a little bit of a stir, just get it mixed up nice like this. And now I'm going to add 75 grams of that starter. And there we are, 75 grams. Now, the rest of this starter, of course, I could feed this and keep this going. And like I told you in the one about the little video about creation and feeding your starter, you can keep this going for years. And there are bake shops that have been using the same starter for 100 years. So that's exactly it. This is alive. And as long as you keep feeding it, it'll be okay. And like we talked about in the other video, when I'm done with this, if I decide I don't want to make any loaves for a couple of weeks, that's okay. I'll feed it, put it back in the fridge, and just let it sit there until I want to ramp it up again. And that's what I did this morning. I ramped it up. So I fed it, and as soon as I reached that double volume, I knew I was ready for this. All right, so I'll move that to the side. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to add my 10 grams of salt. Okay, so normally if it was the double recipe, I'd put 20 grams. I'm doing half of that, so I'm going to put 10. So I'm going to zero that out once again. And then I'm going to add this 10 grams. That's 3, 8, 9, and we've reached 10. So here, if you've made bread with yeast before, and you've watched the other video and we talked about that, this dough is a lot more wet. Okay, it's a lot more wet. So what we have to do here is we're going to try to get that blended. And I'm going to try to show you as I do that. It's a very sort of wet thing. So I'm trying to scoop down from the bottom. And I'm going to bring this up, and you can see the stickiness. And I just want to bring that around. That's it, and get it blended. And it's like I'm trying to stretch that out as I go. Fold it over like that. Bring it around, fold it. And I'm trying to get all the stuff on the sides too. And what I want is my starter to get all mixed into that. Okay, as well as my salt, of course. There we go. There we go. So you don't have to knead it like you would a yeast-based dough. Okay, so this is what I've got now. And I'm going to repeat this process every 30 minutes for 2 hours. In the meantime, I'll keep it covered. After that, 2 hours has passed. So I've done every half hour, I've come in and sort of folded it, stretched it, and brought it back onto itself like that. I'm going to cover that, and I'll leave that covered for 4 to 7 hours. And then after that, I can move on to the next stage of actually shaping my dough and doing that. So then you could go on to that other video, shaping your baguettes. And then when I get the other video done for the loaf for the oven, I'll show you how to do that as well. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. So remember, you're going to initially get your starter ramped up. That's really important. Second step, you're going to need to autolyse. Okay, so that's your flour and your water that are just going to sit there for about 45 minutes or so. Then I'm going to add my starter and my salt to my autolyse, and then I'm going to combine it. I'm going to let it sit for 30 minutes. I'm going to come back, do another stretch and fold once again, let it sit, and I'm going to repeat that 4 times. So that's going to take up another, so far 45 minutes for the autolyse, and then you've got 2 more hours of just flipping it every half hour. Then I'm going to let it sit for 4 to 7 hours, and then I will start my initial shaping, which could be for baguettes, it could be for a loaf, could be for pretzels, whatever. Okay, and we'll take it from there. So thanks for joining me. See you.